From Stonetown, Zanzibar, this is Josh Friedman coming to you on Revolution Day here in Zanzibar. It is January 12th, 2019. Last night, as I was coming to you in a broadcast from the Revolution Day kickoff festivities, including the fireworks show, which I live streamed, I misspoke. I said that it was 2018. No, I have not gone back in time. It is 2019. Nonetheless, it is Revolution Day, and as promised, I will be discussing with you some of the history and the geopolitical significance and implications surrounding the Zanzibar Revolution of January 12th, 1964. Behind me is the former home of the Sultan. The Sultan Jamshid bin Abdullah was the Sultan at the time of the revolution, and he was deposed, and during the events, or slightly preceding the events of January 12th, 1964, bin Abdullah escaped or was evacuated. He left this palace and was picked up along with other Zanzibari officials in a boat that was possibly around here at the Stonetown Harbor or maybe elsewhere. I don't know exactly. The Sultan headed to the mainland and then eventually ended up in Britain, where he is actually still there today. The deposed Sultan of Zanzibar is an old man, but he's still alive and still living with his family in the UK. Now let's go back to the events leading up to January 12th, 1964. Shortly before then, Zanzibar had gained independence, and it was independence not actually from Oman, as I had previously discussed. Zanzibar was effectively colonized by Oman, and it was part of Oman for, at least formally, for nearly a couple centuries, and then it continued to be ruled by an Omani sultan under the British Protectorate. Well, the British Protectorate ended, and just before the revolution, Zanzibar gained independence, but it still had an Oman, and that Oman was, along with the Zanzibari government, was overthrown on January 12th, 1964. A group of African revolutionaries led by a man by the name John Okello, who was actually not Zanzibari and was from Uganda. He led a group of revolutionaries that overwhelmed the rather lightly armed, poorly trained forces of the Sultan. They took over Stonetown and took over the whole island of Unguja. There was fighting, but they really overwhelmed the Sultan and the government's forces pretty easily, and some bloody times ensued. Upwards, possibly as many as 20,000 Arabs were killed during the revolution and in the days after. Also targeted, not just were Arabs, but were people of Indian and South Asian descent. They were significant minorities, and to some extent still are here in Zanzibar. They were targeted by the revolutionaries as well, and there were all kinds of disgusting acts happening. There were bodies buried in mass pits. There were body parts removed and put in places, and there were many women who were raped. Children as well, I believe, were raped. There were all kinds of crimes going on. It was very bloody, very messy. There isn't really one set figure as to the body toll, but various reports have it as being anywhere from a few thousand to 20,000 people were killed. One man here who witnessed the revolution, who I spoke with, told me that indeed about 20,000 Arabs were killed, and there were lots and lots of homes and businesses that were looted. There was really chaos in the streets of Stone Town and all over the island. People being gunned down, bodies being disgusting things happening to them, and people buried in mass pits, bodies spotted all along roadsides. All kinds of very gruesome acts were occurring. Now, after the revolution, a revolutionary government took over, and it didn't last long. The revolutionary government had, interestingly, close ties to, and was forming relations with communist countries. And in a sense, Zanzibar was quickly becoming a focal point in the Cold War. But rather than falling to the communist bloc, what ended up happening was just about 3 months after the revolution, Zanzibar united with Tanganyika on the mainland to form the modern country of Tanzania under the leadership of then Tanganyikan president, later Tanzanian president Julius Nyerere, who actually ruled Tanzania for another couple decades thereafter. Nyerere was a figure who was pretty socialist, but he had decent ties with both sides of the Cold War and was by no means aligned with the communists, and he was basically respected in the West and had some pretty good ties with Western leaders. And under Nyerere's leadership and under the deal that united Zanzibar with Tanganyika to form the country of Tanzania, Zanzibar basically fell completely out of the control of the Arab world. It drifted away from communism, which some people were scared it would drift toward, and it didn't become a Western ally by any stretch of imagination. It was kind of a nationalist, socialist, East African nation, but nonetheless there was a major shift in the geopolitical direction of the island. The 200 or so years of Arab rule were over. The British protectorate was over, and there were some theories that the British were heavily involved in plotting or possibly steering the events of the revolution or post-revolution. I don't really know what truth there is to that. Some people believe that here, but nonetheless, the outcome was something that was rather favorable to the British and the West. Now, this raises some peculiarities. Last night, if you were watching or you watched the replay, you saw how tens of thousands or more people were out celebrating Revolution Day. They were, as is traditionally the case here, just outside Stone Town. There's a big fireworks show. There's the DJ, music blasting, people dancing, having a great time. And naturally, you might have some questions. Why are people celebrating this event that resulted in thousands of people being killed and bodies being butchered? And I also failed to mention that there were many Arabs who were driven out of Zanzibar back to Oman and possibly elsewhere in the Arab world. So why are people 55 years later screaming and dancing and setting off fireworks to celebrate such an event? You might find that peculiar, and I for one find it peculiar, although I don't think the majority of the people who were out there partying last night, I don't think it's on their minds that they're celebrating something that is borderline genocide. I think most people out there are just having a good time, and it's one day of year that's an excuse for having a good time. But that's not the only peculiarity that arises. And so I was discussing the geopolitical shift of Zanzibar post-revolution. And I was also discussing how it seemed to kind of fall in line of the interests of the British and the West, but more so Zanzibar fell in line of the interests of Nyerere and Tanganyika, and for lack of a better word, the mainland. And that still very much matters today, and simmering below the surface, there are certain tensions and concerns. If you walk around Zanzibar and ask lots and lots of locals, you're bound to hear that many of these people actually support independence, that they've got a variety of gripes nowadays with the mainland for reasons that I'm not going to get into now. It's too much for this video. But a lot of people here have a lot of gripes with the mainland, and many of them have secessionist leanings, and many of them support full-on independence from Tanzania and want Zanzibar to go back to being, or flat out be, an independent country. And given the events of the revolution, how it steered Zanzibar effectively under the rule of the mainland, it's so peculiar. Not only how people are celebrating an event that included mass killings, but they're celebrating an event that effectively steered Zanzibar, or set up a system of governance, rule largely by the mainland, that most people here oppose. So Revolution Day, in a sense, marks the day in which, not directly, because the merger, the unity of Tanganyika and Zanzibar happened 3 months later, but effectively, I mean, the revolution led to that. So effectively, Revolution Day marks a day in which Zanzibar came under the thumb of the mainland, and that's something that a lot of people here are not happy with. To this day, yet thousands and thousands of people hit the streets and hit the soccer pitch to celebrate Revolution Day. So that's another of the peculiarities. There are certainly a bunch of complexities surrounding the revolution, and there are a lot of peculiarities surrounding Revolution Day. I just wanted to discuss some of that with you, some of which I find very interesting. And I would like to use this opportunity to wrap up my stay and my coverage in and from Zanzibar, which has truly been a pleasure for me. I've discussed this at length in several videos already. I highly recommend Zanzibar as a tourist destination, and as you can see, I find the culture and the history and the politics very interesting. I believe right over there, the Kilimanjaro boat that's coming in, I believe that's the ferry from the mainland. I'm not positive, but I'm going to be hopping on that in the opposite direction very soon, maybe in just a couple of days from now. So I've got to prepare to get out of here and embark upon my travels exploring the mainland, and that's something to look forward to. But I'm glad I had this opportunity to wrap up my Zanzibar stay with a very fitting moment, which is Revolution Day. And I hope you learned something during my stay here and my coverage from Zanzibar, and particularly Stone Town. I certainly learned a lot, and I've very much enjoyed bringing these reports to you. So one last time for 2019, unless I happen to be back next European winter, but at least for January 2019, that is a wrap from Stone Town, and that is a wrap from Zanzibar. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all a happy new year and a happy 2019, and let it be a great one. Goodbye for now from outside the former home of the Sultan on Revolution Day here in Zanzibar. Goodbye.